All roads lead here, don't they? Back to where it all began. Back to those musty carpets and towering shelves, rows filled with movie artwork that would define a childhood. We've repeatedly discussed in this series the importance of the VHS box art and how, in the video store era, it would make or break what you took home for the night. Just think how streaming services can change the cover of any movie to be some random damn screen grab. Netflix. But as antiquated as it may seem now, the art of the VHS was sometimes the only marketing that mattered. One man who understood that above most else was Charles Band. As one of the earliest pioneers of the home video industry, it's fitting that we finally delve into the world of horror and sci-fi populated with little monsters, ghouls, and goblins. As we near the end of our 80s horror memories, let's take one last ride to the nexus of youth and storytelling, as we delve into one cult movie that defined the video store experience. Watch out for Nazis, be suspicious of psychics, and let your freak flag fly, because today we're opening the trunk to Puppet Master on our 80s horror memories. Since you're watching this, it's safe to assume that you're a horror fan like me. You've probably also stumbled upon some gems that have flown under the mainstream radar while perusing the video cassette shelves at your local store. And nestled in the horror landscape, there's a flick that carved its own niche and marked a dynasty's inception. One of the greatest goddamn long-running low-budget series out there. Enter Puppet Master. Now, I should state that Full Moon peaked in the 90s. Their era wasn't really the 80s, but Puppet Master and their Full Moon motto is the direct result of the ingenuity and creativity born out of the 80s. Now let's go back to 1989. The horror scene is ripe with slashers and supernatural terrors. From Mr. Krueger babysitting in Dream Child to Jason taking Manhattan via Vancouver. The times were, well, not to sound cliched, but they were a-changin'. And then out of the shadows comes a movie that's literally a cut above the low-tier chum of its contemporaries. Enter Full Moon Entertainment, the brainchild of legendary filmmaker and entrepreneur Charles Band. With Puppet Master, Band didn't just unleash a movie, he birthed an empire. I have a story similar to many, one that we share deep into the core of 80s horror fandom, and kids especially. Finding your movie for the evening. Back in the early 90s, I would be given enough cash to rent 2 movies on a good weekend, maybe 3 if my parents were feeling generous. And so my sister and I would easily spend over an hour and a half looking over every case, front and back, determining what bets were to be made that evening. And as Band would become famous for, there it was, Puppet Master, an eerie and intriguing cover that sold the experience with the killer tagline, "Evil comes in all sizes." A big part of its success and longevity comes down to the ingenious cover, an open antique trunk showing off 5 unique pint-sized killers. The artistic vibe of these old hand-drawn posters just hits a little different. I know you're thinking, no shit, but there is a whole new generation who didn't grow up with these types of art, and so, like most things in life, are fading out of the outskirts of time. Full Moon Entertainment was savvy when it came to marketing. Band always had a guerrilla-style approach to promoting his films. The guy's a natural-born salesman, leveraging eye-catching cover art with cool and slightly schlocky taglines. The studio piqued the curiosity of all of us. Kids like me, older brother.
I grew up in this kind of small Midwest town. And we were the first ones of my friend group that got a VCR and had like the bigger TV. Now, again, in today's standards, that TV is nothing, but in our house, like we were the first ones. We were the first ones to have cable. I remember when my dad subscribed to HBO, and like all my friends would come over for that. But one of these kind of rituals that my family did every single Friday is they let me go to the local video store and pick out whatever movies I wanted, which was great because, you know, they were very liberal and progressive as it related to not putting these insane restrictions on me to watch things. And so it became this routine that every Friday we would go to Blockbuster and I would get to go, and I chose solely on the box art of a movie. And I don't remember when Blockbuster started, if it was I don't remember when it was, late 80s or early 90s, whenever that was, but all of the movies that I would gravitate to were 80s horror things. I mean, when you would see the box of Critters or Ghoulies of these things coming out of a toilet, I was like, that. I want that. And this was, before the days of IMDb. You couldn't just, you couldn't look up what this was, so it was based solely on the box art. And so for me, I think that my love of these kind of 80s horror films stemmed from VHS cassette tapes and box art. I probably missed some amazing gems because they didn't have great box art, but I saw everything that was exploitative, sexualized, or violent on the cover of a Blockbuster movie. Every time.
But Puppet Master didn't end up being what I thought, and it's something I've always respected and appreciated. There is a strangeness to it all. Writers Kenneth J. Hall and Joseph G. Collodi go all in with a story that's far more distinctive and charming than it has any right to be. Toss in some creepy killer marionettes, knock a few folks off, and we're having a good time. No need for more. But here we mix Egyptian magic, killer puppets, grumpy psychics, a sinister hotel, and Nazi spies for good measure. Please do me a favor and listen to that again. Now tell me that doesn't sound like an absolute blast. The surprising charm of Puppet Master is that odd psychic angle. We get an elaborate for a tight 90-minute low-budget flick, about ancient magical spells, workplace betrayal, and a healthy amount of horniness. My favorite. It could just easily work with the sexual overtones, suspicious characters, and supernatural sci-fi elements. Yet adding killer puppets makes things even wilder. It's a genius move that elevates this from your run-of-the-mill slasher to a peculiar and enduring style that would define Full Moon Entertainment. They didn't need big budgets to deliver their style of storytelling. All they needed was one or two good sets, a little creativity, and a dash of psychic energy. And a quick side rant, if you loved this movie like me, let us admit that the days of youth are gone. We can see things a bit more clearly, the patterns of the universe become more apparent, and the foundation of truth must be upheld. Okay, good. Now let's admit that the puppets were never really the bad guys. Did they kill the innocent? Sure, but it's always at the hands of a controller. Hell, Rick basically hangs out with the puppets when he brings them back in part 4. Why? Because the man is chill and has no ill intent. By part 3, they're fighting Nazis. And in this, they turn on their master once he becomes a dick. I'm just saying, I think it's time that we admit that they are far more tragic than they are evil. Now, Full Moon was the cheap and fast model of the home video market way back when. So there were always a few things that didn't work effects-wise. But what earned them respect was that Full Moon always tried to look and feel big on a modest budget. Long before the days of CGI, Puppet Master relied on good old-fashioned puppetry, prosthetics, and an iconic look. Pinhead has the style of a 40s bandit that may rob you in an alley, while Leech Woman has the appearance of a haunted doll. Look at Blade and you see his style takes after a Nazi colonel, while Tunneler has the standard look of a soldier. Jester is, well, a jester. And let's be honest, he kinda just sits there and looks. My dude doesn't really lend a helping hand. Maybe grab a knife or something. Sorry Jester fans, but he is not pulling his weight like he should. We get fun scenes like Tunneler drilling toward a slow-to-move Carissa. Clearly, budget constraints were a factor, and everyone had to work quickly and efficiently. Yet this is a fine example of how to make every special effects scene count. David Allen worked wonders with what he had, and created some of the most memorable-looking mini-killers. The puppets are only in the movie for about 7-ish minutes. Obviously because of budget, yet it was enough to spark a series with sequels still being released to this day. Now Now let's get back to the Charles Band of it all. With over 280 films and around 50 directorial gigs under his belt, it's safe to say that he's left a pretty big mark, and the man is still working as we speak. But what first made his name famous amongst my generation was his becoming the cult king of the early video store. To make a long story incredibly short, in 1977, Band caught wind of Andre Blais, who was shaking things up in the home video scene by licensing films for distribution. Band saw his chance and decided to jump in, creating his own label for indie cult flicks, like Media Home Entertainment, named after his ex. Oh, you sly SOB, and Wizard Video. But life wasn't all smooth sailing for Band. The 80s hit hard. Financial woes, alongside a shady friend/business partner named Edward Sarlouis, put Band's Empire Pictures to bed. The company was gutted and sold for parts. But that's what I've always respected and loved about the man. He would simply shake it off and reinvent himself. He's the cost-effective Bowie of the small and weird. Despite the setbacks, he kept pushing forward, and in 1988 he dove headfirst into the direct-to-video business, starting Full Moon. And the one big thing that really helped Band was teaming up with Paramount Pictures. Thanks to Paramount's massive distribution network, Band negotiated a deal that combined Paramount's distribution power with Full Moon's knack for promotion. The collaboration not only boosted the visibility of their movies, but also helped cultivate a loyal and decades-spanning fan base. Starting off with what would be the company's flagship series, Band didn't just create a movie, but launched a brand. Full Moon became synonymous with offbeat horror, churning out a steady stream of cult classics that captured the imaginations of the video store generation. And here I am today, paying back the favor. And what was his first movie under his new title? Puppet Master, of course. There's a scene that defines everything here, one that I've always loved, one that makes the movie great, silly, and iconic. I'm of course talking about the ending. The reveal of Jimmy F. Skaggs' Neil being alive. Sure, it's telegraphed 100 miles down the road, but his dinner party reveal is the type of over-the-top drama that I love. A Bond-esque detailed report of his master plan, while surrounded by all of his victims, killed courtesy of his loyal puppets. It's glorious and cheesy in all the right ways. By the time the guy is done giving away every secret, he decides to abuse Jester while insulting the other puppets. You know, the murderous ones who have done all of the actual work here. And like any pissed off being that's tormented, they turn on their master and torture him to death. It's sweet, heartfelt, and a nice wholesome ending where one's comeuppance is due. Like a moral lesson in a Disney flick where it's the friends we made along the way. And oh, don't be a dick. And like any good businessman, Band made sure to add a cliffhanger. This is in the form of Megan, who brings the stuffed dog of Dana back to life. Knowing more about the work being done at the hotel than she let on, and what she found in Andre's diary, she might be calling the shots with the puppets going forward. Of course, this was abandoned as she starts off dead in the sequel, but it keeps the ending open to have the puppets out and about. I won't pretend like there isn't a sprinkling of nostalgia about it. Still, when you have a fun, schlocky, and horny movie about shifty psychics, killer puppets, and an over-the-top villain ending, I feel like it's going to transcend above the stale and boring every time. That's why I'm here today talking about Puppet Master. A kid stumbled upon some cool cover art for some random horror movie long ago and took a chance. What transpired became a lifelong love of the weird cult films that tried their damnedest, swung hard, and sometimes missed. 1989 started what would ultimately be a short-lived era, but one that influenced a whole generation. We have toys, comics, a video game, and sequels galore. All because Charles Band knew an eye-catching poster could do a lot of heavy lifting. And back we are, we've come full circle, back in the video aisle once again, looking for anything in what seems like every choice in the world. I miss it, but I also know it's just a product of a different time. It was a simpler time, sure, and there's a beauty in the simplicity of it all, but it's just the mind's way of looking back. As I reflect back on those moments, I realize how fortunate I am to have been a part of that era. to have cut my teeth on the cult phenomenon that would shape my love for the genre. Full Moon's epic reign may have been short-lived, but in those 6 glorious years, they gifted us with a treasure trove of classics, and at the forefront of it all was Puppet Master, a film that kicked off a legacy of weird and wonderful storytelling. And as much as I cherish those moments, I also embrace the ever-expanding landscape of horror. And while I may miss the simplicity of the video store era, unlike Jack Shepherd, we can't go back. More options means more opportunities, and I want the biggest tent possible. So here's to Puppet Master and the countless other classics that continue to fuel our passion for horror.
On the next episode, we're going to take a look at the worst and the best of the Mount Rushmore of horror. Until next time, gore hounds.
Hi, Mr. Charles Band. It is an absolute pleasure talking to you here with the Primevals. I'm glad you got to kind of join along. How have you been, my friend?
Super good. You know, it's in a business where you conceive a movie, get a script written, shoot it 60 days later, and it's out in 5 months. To talk about a movie that I was first introduced to 45 years ago and finally made 30 years ago and finally finished at the end of last year. It's just such a bizarro stretch. It's got to be pretty unique in show business.
It is perhaps the most important discovery of the century.
I'm also on my way this Friday to Fantasia in Montreal, so it's playing that film festival. Then there's several others. I forget their names. I'm sorry. And then we're going to Spain in October. So the truth is, and hopefully all this will ignite more interest and we'll make some good deals, but it probably means the movie itself won't come out till next year. So apropos the movie that never sort of got completed till recently, even the sort of distribution part of this, which, you know, if it was just up to me and it was a simple, I mean, we would have had it out in January because the movie was finished late November. But it does deserve this sort of, you know, prestigious launch. So I'm excited about it.
So obviously, David Allen was an old friend of yours. You know, you guys worked together in Laser Blast, Ghoulies 2, both the Oblivions, and many more. I mean, this guy was also doing Willow and Ghostbusters 2. Right. But you bonded over your sort of love of that sort of old practical effects. And even in your book, when you mention that the atomic bomb of the digital effects and Jurassic Park, you both knew that there was something still to the old way. Right. Can you touch about the importance of how you kept Primevals alive all these years and how you got to where you are now, releasing the film since the 70s?
You know you can't answer those questions without a living specimen.
Which requires an expedition.
That's a ridiculous story. Well, my first love was always for sci-fi fantasy, so huge fan, obviously going back to King Kong, but Jason and the Argonauts and Seven Voyages Sinbad, and those magical stop motion animation shots were a big, you know, I don't know what the right word is anymore, but let's just say a turn on. It had a lot to do with what I love about these movies. Now, I wound up then making movies in the early to mid 70s that were more horror based, even though I made a few sci-fi movies as well. But I found that in my budget range and what I was capable of doing, the sci-fi canvas was a little too expensive. So if you look at my body of work so far, over 300 movies, most of them are horror films. Having said that, I was ready to make my first sci-fi movie back in the 70s called Laser Blast. And the dream was to find a way to create stop motion animation characters for these aliens who come to Earth and carelessly leave their laser blast gun for our kid to find it and get revenge on people who tortured him. Anyway, And I found my way, long story, to David Allen, who even at that point was well known. He had made a number of movies, and I'd seen some of his work, and he was famous at the time. This is the 77, 78. He was the guy who had developed and animated the Pillsbury Doughboy. Of course, now it's all CGI, but back then it was a stop motion animation character for those commercials. Anyway, Dave and I got together. I said, Dave, I don't have the kind of money I'm sure you want, but can you please do the stop motion for Laser Blast? He had an incredible team, Dennis Muir and Phil Tippett, people who all went on to be huge, special effects, kings in their field. But back then he was working out at a little studio in Burbank. He agreed to do the show. And of course, I couldn't wait to see that first stop motion animation shot of one of those lizard creatures doing its thing. And then I quickly learned the patience of being involved in a project that uses stop motion animation, because it was after we built the thing and spent the money for the armature and finally it was time to shoot. And there it is 5 days later. And he said, I got my first shot. Come by and see it. It was literally a 4-second shot. That's kind of the rhythm. But it was so magical. I thought, oh my God, this is it. This is it. At that time, Dave told me about his pet project, the Primevals. He said, oh, it's got 250, 300 stop motion shots, and it's going to take 12 to 14 weeks to shoot. We need to go to the Himalayas. I go, oh, well, I'm not exactly the right guy for that, but one day maybe we'll find a way to make it. And then as the story goes, briefly, I've worked with Dave on many movies during the late 70s, the 80s, Dolls, the first Puppet Master movies. And finally, around the mid 90s, it was time we were just doing well enough, Full Moon, to fund the Primevals. And we went out and shot it. It was a huge movie for us. I mean, our budgets are always well under $1 million. This was about a $4 million budget. But the real twist was, not only was it a 12-week shoot, and we went to the Italian Dolomites, and I had a studio in Romania at the time, and we built all these sets. The plan was shoot the movie and then spend 2 years doing 250 stop motion animation shots. 2 years. So imagine having that investment. The movie's done. Everyone's excited to see it, and then sadly, about 14 months into that 2-year program, Dave Allen dies of cancer, and that was at the exact same time that Full Moon's fortunes ebbed, which has happened many times in my career, and we had to box everything up. And it took all these years, up to maybe 4 years ago, to be back in a position where we can complete the work. So Chris Endicott, who was Dave's right arm guy, we put a team together, and once again, slowly but surely, 1 or 2 shots per week over the last 3-4 years, we finally finished the movie at the end of last year.
Nice speech.
Matt.
If we can discover how this creature crossed the genetic barrier from one life form to another, we'll unlock the mysteries of heredity.
And in the book, you actually mentioned how you would have lunches with Chris Endicott, and you guys would discuss the Primevals kind of like over and over. I know obviously the entire thing couldn't be completed as Mr. Allen's script. So how did you guys decide like what was to be the movie in the end?
So for many years, as things got a little better for Full Moon, and we, after the death of the direct-to-video business, which practically put a lot of people out of business, and we were hanging on by our short hairs. But with streaming, and luckily having sold everything to stay alive, I did not sell my library, and that became obviously what kept us going. And we got into streaming, and things started to flourish again a little bit. So I kept meeting with Chris, and I'm saying, Chris, we've got to finish this movie. His sticking point was, well, we really need to finish it the way Dave would want to finish it, which would have involved way too many additional stop motion animation shots. I didn't have the budget, and I didn't want to spend the next 5 years or 10 years of my life still finishing Primevals. So we came up with a compromise that ironically, we wanted to finish most of the shots anyway, but the compromise was, okay, then let's finish 2 versions. One is, let's just say the commercial version, which will be, there's a couple scenes that we can't have in there. One in particular with this lizard creature that attacks them. And then there's a few other moments, but not a lot. Let's not finish those scenes, but let's finish all the shots, all the missing links, all the pieces that would get us to the end of the movie. That'll be the commercial version, meaning we could exploit it, we can stream it, we can exhibit it. But in fairness to Dave, let's also finish his version because he was meticulous in all his stop motion animation shots. Some of them are live stop motion animation boards. I'm sorry, I said the wrong thing. Storyboards. So basically, the sort of agreement was, yes, it'll be streamed as a commercial, the slightly shorter version, and it would be exhibited that way. But when we release the fancy Blu-ray box set, let's have two versions. Let's have the version that's the commercial version, the one that we're able to finish, so people who aren't in the business, who don't really understand any of this, will enjoy an amazing movie. And then let's have Dave Allen's version, also scored, also finessed in terms of sound, but that will include the storyboards of the few unfinished scenes, so people will get what the movie would have looked like had we shot every single scene and every single stop motion animation shot that Dave designed. So that's what's happening. So when this movie comes out, it'll be just that. There'll be I'm sure some theatrical, there'll be streaming, and then when the Blu-ray box set comes out, people will be able to look at the version, the commercial version, and the one that will have Dave Allen's missing shots.
Can you get into the process of how you guys cleaned it up? Because I would say this is the first time I've seen a 90s full moon 4K, but it looks like it was shot yesterday, if that makes any sense.
It does make sense. It's a movie as it gets released. It'll be the first time the movie's been released. Will look like a retro feature. It'll look like exactly as you describe it. Well, we shot it on 35. We had a fantastic DP, Adolfo Bartoli. So, these were beautifully lit shots. We had enough money to, find the right locations. A lot of it was shot in Romania. We built sets. As I said, we went to the Italian Dolomites. It was the only other movie I've made in my career that was close to that budget, not quite as much, was Stuart Gordon's Robot Jocks. That also was, for us, a several $1 million movie. Otherwise, the movies were much, much, much less expensive. So we had the budget to afford those locations. We had a great DP. Our average shoot back then, when we had more money, was 4 weeks. Now it's less than 2 weeks. Prime Beatles was 12 weeks. And needless to say, the post-production time is decades. So, at the end of the day, I think it's all on the screen, but it has that vibe, it was shot then. And it's also Dave Allen's, his approach. He boarded the whole movie, not just the stop motion shots, but he really was meticulous in how he shot it. And it's kind of old school, all the tricks you would see today with cameras that weigh 2 pounds that you can fly around, they weren't used. So I think the style as well of both the direction and the way he used his camera to tell the story is kind of retro.
What are you two after? Tigers? Buffalo?
Something even more dangerous.
We're searching for a Yeti.
There's a part in the book, which I 100% recommend, is one of the greatest adventures that kind of stuck with me. And it was when you talked about the first to go. But I felt like this, in a weird way, encompasses sort of a long journey for Full Moon, because not only is this just you finish a movie, but it's almost honoring an old friend. But at this point, you're done. So where do you go from here? Being that one of the longest gestation movies and projects, and like I said, honoring somebody you love is done. What do you do now?
There was zero financial reason to finish this movie. We'd be lucky if we recover 5% of the budget in today's current, digital dime world. So as you said, the reason to finish this movie was because of the commitment and the love that Dave had for this project. And I've been asked a ton of times, why are you spending this? Even the cost to finish it is more than we'll probably bring back. So, there are reasons you do things, not always for money. Definitely Prime Beatles is a good example. But, I hope that people who followed Full Moon and new fans, as we have new fans as well, and all the movies we're trying to be clever with that we're making right now, some of which I think are turning out really, really well, it'll hopefully, send a good vibe into the Full Moon universe. We have a couple of really interesting possible reboot deals brewing. Now, of course, everything's slowed down or stopped because of the writer's strike. And and the SAG strike. But in time, that'll turn around, and it'll be nice to see some of these movies like Trancers, which is one of them, get made in the case of Trancers into a really hopefully well-appointed series on one of the bigger streaming services. So Primevals, I think, will live on. But yeah, it definitely. I mean, the other things we're doing. I mean, I love publishing Delirium. This is our 5th year. I think issue 34 is coming out. It's quarterly. Chris Alexander, who used to be the editor of Fangoria, has been the editor. He's a good friend. He's a big part of Full Moon. There's no financial reason today to publish whatever it is, a 52-page magazine. It's like when someone goes, well, Charlie, here's what it costs, and these are your subscribers. I say, yeah, but it's still cool. I mean, there are people who get that magazine and go, it smells like a magazine. You open it up. It's we give a lot of them away at conventions. So sometimes you just do things because it's what you dreamed of doing as a kid, not always because, oh, well, okay, we're not going to make money. So it's a bizarre, long answer, but that's part of it.
No, but I do want to say, though, that, in this business, I think there's a lot of, there's a lot of grift, there's a lot of snakes. It's with any business, but it does mean a lot to me, and I think a lot to the Full Moon fans, that you've carried this torch for your friend this many years, and you've honored his legacy by finishing it well. And, I'm excited for people to see it. It's a fantastic old school, stop motion animation flick. It feels like the 90s stuff. And to be very fair, I think you're kicking ass now. The new Subspecies was fantastic. I actually love that people are coming around to, and you mentioned your book, to the coronavirus, Corona Zombies, that I know you got a lot of shit for at first, but then all of a sudden people start watching it and realize, oh, it's a fun joke. So I love that you guys are always sort of progressing, always kicking ass. And
well, I appreciate it. I'll give you two things. One, going back to Corona Zombies, which we made literally on the eve of the pandemic. Yeah, we were getting a lot of shit, but a lot of people recognize it for making fun at the time of how crazy the world was, and stealing toilet paper. The whole thing was silly enough. But I recently watched the movie again, and occasionally I get an odd post or a letter, email going, I watched this thing and I was afraid to for a while, but you were spot on. It was hilarious, this, that, and the other. I mean, it's a big nod to Woody Allen's What's Up, Tiger Lily, that we created this formula. But, sometimes it's not great to be so ahead of the times, and sometimes it's kind of fun. But my best worst story, which is I think it's in the book, is after I sold Media Home Entertainment in the late 70s. I started Wizard Video. We had all these bizarre movies, big box films. We had Texas Chainsaw Massacre on Halloween. And then I thought, wait a minute, video games seem to be a cool thing. I wasn't even a video game guy, but Atari. So I thought, let me start Wizard Video Games. So I right away went to my friend the Carpenter, and I licensed Halloween, obviously through the distributor, and I licensed Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And I developed, being a neophyte in that business, 2 Atari-style video games, each with a little theme that is recognizable from the movie, little stick guys, completely ridiculous, but it was cool at the time. Spent a bunch of money, took, 50 or 100 of each of these games to the Consumer Electronics Show in Chicago, a lot of fanfare, PR. I thought, this is it. This is going to make tens of millions of dollars, and I'll be able to fund my movies. And I couldn't sell a goddamn unit. And the reason why is people would, first of all, these were little small buyers. It was like Sears. The buyers would come and say, you're crazy. Video games are for children.
You're ahead of the game.
This is not what people want. We'd be interested if it was about something fun, but this is not fun. You got so forget it. I could not sell these things, and I eventually gave some away. Of course, now they're worth a fortune, apparently, on eBay. A mid-condition Texas Chainsaws, thousands of dollars, Atari-style video game. So that's an example of something that definitely was fucked up, because definitely lost a bunch of money. And I moved on and I made movies again. So, it's always a little bit of all of that. Thank you. And I'm going to end by saying, because I absolutely love JoBlo, and it's awesome, I have something super cool that I've been biting my tongue not to talk about. But if you want to set up a time next week, maybe mid next week, I want to reveal and premiere this thing on your outlet, because it's super cool and very timely, apropos everything we're talking about.
Hi, friends, your humble narrator Tyler Nichols here, and I hope that you enjoyed that episode of 80s Horror Memories. If you missed our previous episode, click over here. If you want to see more from our series, click up here. And if you're not subscribed yet, what are you doing? Subscribe right here. And most importantly, stay spooky, folks.